if we get into something confidential, I'll shut it off. But I'm just going to let that roll.
I'm not worried about my shirt then.
No. Want to show people what it's like
Through you.
Bunch of old blokes talking about caravans.
That's right. That's right. And just a little bit of news. I was saying to Brad on the phone before that Carol completed her part of the book yesterday, so we're now on the cover, which currently is with my daughter for any suggestions. She has a degree in graphic design, so we're leaning on that, and probably sometime later today I'll agree on whatever the two girls come up with, and then we'll be away. So it's a good.
Have you got any examples you can show us? What's up for debate?
No, I haven't got any currently. I haven't seen what they've come up with. I gave them a couple of ideas, and I've seen, but I haven't got anything I can show you right now. So, but you know, but yeah, no, it's good to get to this point. I'm at the point where I'm, and this is what happens when you do a project like this. I'm now sick of it. I don't want to see it again. But it's going to be. It's good when the button gets pushed and it'll be out and about. So, and then I'll let you know, because this time of year, how long it takes to get printed and so on, who knows? But I'll let you know when that happens. And I think I've got Jamie, you're on the call tomorrow.
Yeah.
Donovan and Brad, you're on the call on Wednesday. So, but that's a good little milestone. And it kind of struck me. Part of Brad and I were talking about how easy it is for other people to fill his diary up, and how he's getting really, one of his big things next year is to not allow people to fill his diary up. And I guess it's a challenge that a lot of people have, isn't it? We end up, I don't have it anymore, but I do remember the days when I had a personal assistant and all that stuff. And, you know, you come into your office and all of a sudden your diary's full. And I used to say to her, when am I going to have time to think? Or when am I going to have time to read anything or think about some of the conversations that you booked me in for, because I got no time. And I mean, that's 35 years ago, but it seems like it's still current for lots of people. So Brad's on a mission.
Yeah.
Brad, your mission, Brad, is it's not going to happen next year.
Oh, for sure. But I'll just clarify one point. I don't blame anybody, because it's what I allow. And that's the distinct difference, I guess. And because you've just got to be a little bit courageous in saying no. And for me, I think everything's on steroids now, given where we've been the last 10 months, because there's just so much more communication. A lot of it, some of it's redundant and some of it's repetitive. You know, I remember when COVID hit, I was having 7 meetings the same day and they were all on the same topic. But we fall into this trap now that meetings are going in your diary. There's no pre-read, there's no context, there's no outcomes being requested of you. And you turn up as a participant, and an hour later you go, well, that was fascinating. Now what? And so there's another hour gone, and that happens many times a day. And meanwhile, I was saying to Ian, you know, I've got a pool in the backyard and I can go 10 or 11 hours in a day and not leave the office, walk around the yard, and which is so unhealthy, but I'm allowing it to happen to myself. And so for me, it's about just having the courage of saying to people, look, here's the criteria. Let's reset what a meeting looks like. Allow 3 days for pre-read. Make sure that there's some context given to the meeting, the decisions you need from the meeting, so that everybody's getting some value out of it and we're moving the business forward, as opposed to just information sharing. But also to have that luxury of thought and luxury to be able to do what's in Brad Smith's strategy, because that's gone right out the window this year, obviously, and I need to get that back on track.
I reckon we're in a next year's a great time, I reckon, to reinvent, reimagine, you know, whatever, meetings, what the office is for, and how home life looks. I reckon they're the 3 big areas that can all get a workout next year, I reckon.
I think we're enjoyed is with COVID now easing restrictions here in Singapore, we're allowed to be in the office 50% of the time, or 50% of people are allowed to be in the office. So there's two of us in the office here, and basically I'm working from home Mondays and Fridays. And now what I'm doing is trying to do as many of my meetings as possible in person. So I'm basically just saying to people I'm available Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday, and therefore really cutting down my meeting commitments on Mondays and Fridays, which then become me days for either thoughtful contemplation or clearing up office things or going for a swim or a bike ride. You know, it's like, that's working.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've found since I reduced my hours, because once upon a time I used to work about 300 hours a month, and I was a full-on workaholic. Ironically, I was talking to my son at the weekend, who's he's basically a site manager in a big construction firm, and he's gone from, he started, he was on the tools, and then he was a supervisor, and then he got into big heavy machinery and stuff, and now he's basically in the office. That's how his career's sort of, progressed. And he was saying to me at the weekend, he said, "Wouldn't believe it, Dad, I'm working 7 days a week." Because he and I, when he was a teenager, we had lots of conversations about me working 7 days a week. And here we are, he's now doing that. And I said, "Mate, you know from your own life how much of a trap it is." But he was just saying to me, he's got to work 7 days in order to stay on top of everything. So it's interesting, isn't it? How, because what I'm finding now is I only work 25 hours a week now, but I'm really focused in that time, and I take a lot of breaks. Like my plan, the way I work is I work for 90 minutes, and then I go and do something else for an hour. It might be just sitting in the garden. It might be having a cup of coffee with my wife. It might be taking a walk with the dog, whatever it is. And then I come back and have another go. And you know what? And I'm now on this regime for almost a year. I'm 10 times more productive than I was before. I mean,
the question is, if you had employees, Ian, who were on the payroll, would you be happy with them doing that?
I would, assuming that the outputs that we'd agreed that they were going to produce was still happening.
Yeah, that's it.
I think that's the key, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
I don't care. I say to, like at the moment with the book I was talking about, I mean, my wife, she controls the whole publishing process. And, I literally have not interfered in it now. I just said to her, I would like to be there by early December. And this was like a few months ago, because it is there's a lot of really fiddly stuff has to be done to get it right for the people that do the print on demand stuff. But so we agreed on the outcome and the outputs. How much time and energy she spends on it's up to her. And that's how I would operate if I had employees. What do you guys reckon?
Yeah, I agree totally.
Yeah. I've probably been in that space a bit throughout this period of time. We had most of our sales guys at home, as Brad, you had yours at home too. So, so there's got to be a bit of give and take. One of the things I said very early was, I don't expect you to sit here in front of a screen for 8 hours a day and on a phone, because they're all travelling salesmen. So, just got to take the keys off them, take them out of the car, take them out of walking around and doing that. But I said, take the dog for a walk, help the missus vacuum the floor, blah 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 blah. But this is what we need out of you today. It's not necessarily about 8 hours or 6 hours or 14 hours. This is just what we need out of you today.
Yeah.
And if that's done in 5, you beauty. Walk the dog, clean the house, take the car, go for a walk, get it washed. It doesn't matter.
It's the great shift. I mean, Brad and I were talking about percentage of leadership and management, as in leadership being about people and management being about process. In the old management, where managers were worried about what people were doing, it was all about process. Manager looking over, like the old, bloody guard on the railway sort of thing.
Yeah.
Whereas these days, it seems to me, modern leadership is about looking after the people and letting the people work out how they're going to do the process, just agree on the outputs.
Yeah.
Yeah, and in Asia, I can see, particularly here, that they're still very much in Model 1, the command and control type thing. I mean, I know this whole work from home thing, a lot of jobs simply aren't done and can't be done sitting at your computer staring at your screen for 8 or 10 hours a day, not the job. So now that we've sort of been in a period where that's all you have, certainly with my team, I was similar to Jamie, saying, well, I don't expect you to just sit and stare at your computer for 8 or 10 hours a day, but let's agree on what the outcomes are. And that's very unusual. There are companies here who literally required their employees to be sitting in front of their computers the whole day. And if their contract was for 10 hours a day, then they're sitting in front of that screen for 10 hours a day, regardless of what their productivity or what they're actually achieving.
Really?
I heard of companies installing software on their laptops that they could check in at any time what you were doing to make sure you were working.
Just the whole trust factor out the door, isn't it? Then,
Yeah.
I'm just a number. I'm just an employee number. I've got to chop in 8 hours a day.
One of the things that I found fascinating, Paul, I haven't worked in Singapore for a while, but when I first went there 15 years ago, people told me of the command and control structure. They told me about this in Asia in general. And I basically, from around 2004 to about 2011, so it was about a 7-year period, I spent a lot of time in Malaysia, Hong Kong, Singapore, occasionally, other places, Indonesia. And people told me you'll never break the command and control structure. You'll never get people to participate in your workshops, yada yada. Now I took that as a challenge.
Yeah, same. I'll take it as a challenge.
And I had people interacting in the very first workshop I did in Singapore, even though the people that hired me said they won't do anything. What I found is as soon as I encouraged them, I then couldn't stop them.
Yeah.
So they want to, and they're just not allowed.
So I can't understand why there's still the structure.
Still a lot of fear. I mean, if you look at the way the government operates, and therefore the way the corporate world also operates, everyone sort of lives in fear of something. There's still this, which really disturbs me, this mentality that people won't leave their desk until their boss has gone home. So that then your boss doesn't go until his boss is gone, and he doesn't go until his boss is gone. And so you have this situation where everyone's just sitting at their desks doing nothing, but nobody wants to leave. So you got literally a situation where people finish their workday at 9:30, 10:30 at night because everyone's just waiting for their boss to leave.
I mean, you can't make this stuff up, right?
No, it's real. And I think, thankfully, this shutdown that we had has in a massive way challenged that notion. And you can see in certain sectors, certain companies starting to think, well, maybe what we've been doing all these years has been a bit ridiculous, and maybe there is a better way. But those are the exceptions, not the rule. And I think that when you read about these companies that have spyware installed on your laptop so that they can check up on you at any time in the day and make sure that you're on your computer and you're working, that's scary stuff.
Crazy.
There's still a lot, even in the most enlightened sort of places, there's still folk that I find who still want to command and control. I don't get it. Can you guys enlighten me? How come it's still? I get, Asian culture. I do understand that, but not in a place like Australia, and yet there are still lots of managers. It's like we had a guy that Jamie's aware of. You'd ask him how he was going, and he'd say, "Oh, I'm just busy." And I'd say, busy doing what? Because a lot of people are busy, but they're not doing anything productive. And so I don't know. I don't understand how come we're still locked into worrying about how people go about things rather than just agreeing with them on what the outcomes will be and helping them do their best work to get there. I don't get it.
I still think a lot of this comes back to the leaders that you have in roles, because fundamentally, if you said to me right now, those that reported to me, how do I know that they're productive? And I can sit here and rattle that off for the next half an hour and put everyone to sleep. But I know, I fundamentally know, but I don't know 3 degrees of separation down. But if all the leaders are there and they're in tune with their teams and the rhythm, I'd argue that's the recipe that you need. And so that's my belief where I think that culture still goes off track a bit, because there's still those leaders that are so in tune to paradigms of old that we need to be able to do this to effectively measure productivity. That's a concern. And we have it in our company. There's people more senior than me that are still, we still have these healthy debates about whether we're on the right journey at the moment or not, because they believe they need to get their pound of flesh. People have got to log on and log off at certain times and do all these things. Now, some roles, obviously, inherently, they do need to be available for certain times, particularly those front line that are answering phones or call center type of role. It probably might lend itself to being available certain periods of time. Like I can understand that. But if you got somebody that, in a business, you've got 100 widgets that you need to deal with, you need 10 people to deal with it, and that's the optimal operating model. If you're producing that, what else do you need to know? If your attrition is lowering and your absenteeism is lowering and you're getting that, you're going to get those benefits anyway. So I think that's where it all happens. And the other thing too, just going back to the meeting culture, I do believe too that a lot of people are trying to drive meetings and share information because they within themselves are probably worried, how are they being viewed? And that goes back to the leaders again. But if I'm communicating and I'm booking meetings and I'm doing these things, people are going to see that I'm busy, and then they're going to think that I'm doing the right thing. And I think that is also a factor that's come more to the surface during the last 10 months.
I think the word "seem to be busy" is a big driver.
It seems almost like, seen to be busy. It's almost like being seen to be busy is a bit of a badge of honor in some workplaces. Yeah. Rather than actually being productive.
I know someone that I won't name because they're being recorded, who routinely fills their diary up, and I'm talking with absolute crap. But they have a very full diary and meetings that they have no intention of showing up to half the time.
Yeah.
But they're there. They schedule all these meetings, and you just sort of look at it and go, "What are you doing?"
So how do we sort of influence folk that still might be worried about what their people are doing and therefore feel this need to populate diaries or put in spyware or whatever it might be? How do we influence that world?
I think you got to reset expectation firstly, and then lead with conviction. That's the big thing for me. I spoke to my CEO about this recently and said I'm going to rewrite some criteria around having meetings, because at the moment it's just like put it in your diary and the expectation is you turn up, and the intentions are pure. Let's be honest about that. No one's trying to do the wrong thing, but it's just not functional at all. And you're taking a lot of people out of play to share information that you could do through other ways and means. So I think resetting expectation, going, here's the criteria. This is what we need to be doing. I mentioned, and like you, Paul, I won't mention names, but I had lunch with a divisional CFO from National Australia Bank a few years ago. It was a client of mine at the time, and I was talking to him about the meeting culture and how do you deal with it. And he was sharing with me that they set some simple rules in place, and obviously there's got to be a good comms plan behind it, but he actually said there's 72 hours of a pre-read. There must be action items. There must be measurable criteria at the end of that meeting so that we can hold people to account. If people that are hosting the meeting aren't up and running within 3 minutes of the start time, you're to walk out. No one's to have the meeting. So all these criteria went into place. And he said meetings just halved, productivity went up, just some simple rules of engagement. And I've shared that story internally before because it's always resonated with me. I don't always live by it. I'm good at ignoring my own advice sometimes. But if you look back on that and you think, my God, that it is that simple, I think, just to sit there and reset expectations about what a meeting means. Because what's the point of having a meeting when you can read an email and understand the same thing?
Exactly.
It's as simple as that.
I love this phrase you use, Brett. I'd like to hear. I mean, I think I get it, but this lead with conviction. What does that mean in practice?
I just think it's an unwavering pursuit of what you would deem as being excellence. You know, I don't think anyone ever can operate at 100% forever and a day. We all want nirvana, but we're never going to get it. But what does it look like? What does success look like? And if you can define that and the path to get there, well, that should be good enough. You know, one thing I do say to my people, and I've got a lot of them, is I don't expect you to be brilliant all the time, but I do expect you to be consistently good. And if you aim for being consistently above average, you're going to hit the mark every day of the week. You don't need to be doing anything more. And does that mean you operate at 70% of what you can do in a week and be consistently above average? Well, good on you. Take the 30% and have a holiday. Go for a walk, clear your mind, do something.
It's how you drive it. Like it's letting the team know that that's certainly the way I've done it is, you know, there's going to be times when we all need to put in extra, when we all need to be here late or whatever, if we're working on a tender presentation or, you know, we might all be in the office late on a Monday or Tuesday, but then if it's a Friday afternoon and you guys are going on a fishing trip for the weekend, take off at lunchtime instead of sitting at your desk until 5 o'clock and going out and peak out traffic. But you've got to lead from the front with that and let people know it's all right. And it always comes back to that what I was saying in Asia about everyone sitting waiting for their boss to leave. Well, if the boss started getting up, leaving early, saying, well, I'm going to pick up my kids because it's, you know, because I feel like picking up my kids today, well, that also sends a message to the rest of the team that sort of thing's all right.
Yeah.
And you don't make them, you know, the old, it's a classic example. I'm leaving at midday on Friday to go to the caravan. But, you know, you don't let them know that's something you do every Friday, you know. But at the end of the day, but if you've done that effort, you put that effort in and you know, that's the reward for it. I've always been in that space, you know, somebody not feeling well at 10 o'clock in the morning and you say, listen, go home. I don't want to call them for 6 hours, you know, but we'll catch it up as the journey goes on, you know. And then they know not to abuse it and use it. Yeah, it is an interesting one.
If I can share one more story while I'm on a roll, but I talk about trying to be consistent with all this and your actions. It's amazing the effect they have on people. And a great leveler for me is my 17-year-old son, who many times in the last 10 months, you know, he said to me, Dad, I always thought you had a fairly important job, but you actually do nothing but speak all day. That's all you do is talk. And you sit there and go, oh my God, so my son's not going to follow his dad and his career path. Well, that's okay. But is that what he thinks? Because that's all he sees is me talking. And and I'm sure he doesn't understand the context of some of those conversations, but what's he seeing?
The importance.
You know, he's probably not seeing me be expressive in the right ways at the right times and taking time out for myself and doing all those things. He's not seeing it. So it's very
is his way of talking. He's on he's texting and stuff like that. And I found that. Well, I find that when I'm at home and even with my wife, and she'll say, "My God, you're on the phone for so long." And I go, "Yeah, but it's all important connections and conversations, and there might be a bit of how'd you go on the cricket on the weekend, you know, but it's important, the conversation you're having and the faith and the communication information you're sharing, you know."
Yeah.
I wonder how much this is. I deliberately put my phone in a black box because I want to be reminded of the evil of it. But I wonder how much they've affected all of this. You know, I deliberately have like my phone. Most of the time it's switched off. Because I've let people know, you know, I'll get back to you, and it'll always be within 24 hours.
Yeah.
And I don't want to play on the phone. I do it just for interest. Sometimes I'll, you know, if I'm having a cup of coffee, if I'm having a break, I might play a bit somewhere. But how much influence are these on people's lives?
Huge, massively. I mean, I think that's the whole human connection and the interaction. I mean, it was actually nice. So you know, Victoria today, we can come to the office without a mask on, you know. So to walk in this morning for the first time in 4 months and actually physically see someone's face, let alone their lips moving as you're having your conversation, was so enlightening for us all. Yet when when these things are there and we're sitting here saying, "Good morning, love. How are you? Hope you slept well because I left early this morning." Why am I picking it up and ringing the wife so she can hear my voice for the morning? You know, like it's, let alone your staff. You know, it's and I think that for me.
Text you for your birthday and don't ring.
Oh, I hate that. I just hate it. You know, and I deliberately don't go on Facebook for a week or two after my birthday because why can't my brother?
One day, and it sounds like a cartoon or something, but I was literally sitting next to my wife on the couch and I'm scrolling through my phone and she's trying to tell me something, and as usual I'm tuned out, you know, and not listening to her. And so I sort of turned around and said, "Oh, what was that?" She said, "Don't worry, I'll text you."
Yeah, my wife's the same. Well, I was having a coffee with a lady this morning, Deb Hammond, you know her, and we were talking about this, you know, and it's interesting. Yeah, I mean, you're just not in the presence when you've got them, and we were talking about Zoom and Zoom. I had 9 Zooms last week. She had 13 or something, and started to talk about Zoom fatigue. But at least we can see each other and talk to each other, and versus you know, the old we'll just go backwards and forwards all day with an email or a text message. You know, hang on, let's just I quickly send out 10 or 15 minute Zoom requests. Someone will be texting me. I'm thinking this is going to be 25 texts, so I go bang Zoom meeting. They all of a sudden they click on it and I go, "Hey, you going? Let's have a chat about it," because I just haven't got 15 minutes or the fingers to type it out. You know.
I think someone just said an interesting thing. It's about being present.
Present, yeah.
I mean, one of the reasons that I don't use slides in Zoom meetings, and you'll see that Paul already knows because he's already done I've started sending out the slides before the meeting to say, "Look, I won't be having these on screen, but have them handy."
Yeah.
And part of the reason for doing that is I want to be able to look in your eyes. I don't want you reading a slide.
We talked about this last week, didn't we? Yeah, I've just read my notes. Ensure you remain present, completely give the person in front of you your full attention. This will make them feel more valued and more important.
Yeah, there you go. I mean, I want to be. I want to just before you go. I want to be present, and I'm trying to role model the same thing. It's why I've said to people, you know, no more than 30 people in the room because I can't see you. You know, it's too big. Even it's about 25 actually. It's sort of 5 lines of Zoom. That's it, because if I can't see you, the connection for me potentially is lost. Anyway, sorry, Paul, you were going to.
I was going to say it's on top of my list of personal goals actually, to be more present, and I'm aware of it, and whether that's in a meeting with an employee or with my kids or you know, sitting next to my wife and not doing this while we're having a conversation, but to be physically aware of that and be more present. So one of the things I've done is actually set a D&D on my phone that after 6 p.m. I don't get alerts on my phone.
Interesting thing, heart leadership. If you hear your heart first, the heart is about the present moment.
Yeah.
Whereas the head is about the past. Just think about that for a minute.
Past and a bit of the future.
So if you're leading with your head, it's the past. Not that the head's not valuable. It's full of a whole bunch of stuff that's useful, but it's all the past. Whereas if you listen to your heart first, it's the present moment. So it's like Brad, you know, if you in your heart, you're on the phone and your heart says, "Take this call, walk around the pool," then you should go, because that's a better. It's interesting how Brad and I were talking on the phone before, and we were both pacing as we were doing it, because we don't want to sit still. It's just a way. I think it's also a way to be present. I reckon it's a big thing. Leadership's about being present.
What do you think, Donovan?
No worries, all right. Yeah, I agree. Nothing to add to that. I think that there's an interesting thing, you know, this idea of like monitoring
people and, that command and control. I was just thinking that when I heard the conversation, maybe it's just because a lot of these leaders in business don't actually know any better. So they just go in with what they think works. So there's no actual effort put into understanding leadership, understanding people. At least that's been my experience, at least in the public service. But then my question always is, how are these people getting into these leadership positions if this is the way that they go about managing people? I think maybe there's a perception out there that this is what works, this is what needs to happen in organisations.
I think that's always a like for like. You'll find that a leader will employ a leader with similar traits, so that they don't have to work as hard or try and convince or convert or vice versa. And then I think that's how it systemically just filters down, Donovan. That'd be why, Singaporean rule and stuff like that is that way. They'd be probably too afraid to put a kind, caring, hearted person up the top for fear of everything falls over, If I rule this way, then and the next bloke under me rules that way, and then the next one down rules that way, we should all be right. I don't have to get involved too much here.
Yeah.
Interesting using the word rule. So there's a long history of, there were kings and aristocrats, and everyone else did what they were told.
Yeah.
And then the Industrial Revolution came along and the trend continued. But we should be in a better place now, you would have thought.
One of the other challenges that I found coming into Asia was it's so much harder to promote real conversations and authentic conversation, particularly where there's a hierarchy involved. And I find that through that rigid structure of fear, everything is packaged before it's presented to the next level up. So it's like by the time it gets to the top, it's been polished, put a bow on it, wrapped in silver. Here it is. And you're not getting the real story. But that's very much a part of the culture. And I've really tried to promote with my team that, hey, you can tell me anything. Like, I'm not going to get upset. You can tell me anything. But they're just not comfortable doing that. It's almost like, well, no, we're only going to tell you what we want you to hear after we've manipulated it to be what we think you want to hear.
Interesting, because that's an unwritten ground rule. Steve Simpson would call that an unwritten ground rule. It's we only tell people what we think they need to know, instead of telling them whatever's on our hearts.
Yeah.
But Paul, I think you've raised one of the barriers to being present and having productive meetings and so on. You nailed it. It's hierarchies.
Yeah, I can tell you, if you held a meeting here and you had a bunch of people in the rooms of different levels in the hierarchy, and the CEO had 10 people in the room and just said, right, what's going on? Nobody would say anything. They'd all just sit there in absolute silence because there's this absolute fear of saying the wrong thing when there's higher ups in the room.
Yeah. Incredible. I just had a flash of that famous program, Yes Minister. It's still like that in politics, it seems, and it's still like that in a lot of organisations. I shouldn't be laughing really, because it's quite sad when you think of it.
And you read the best leaders are the ones who just walk up to someone on the factory floor and say, "Tell me what's going on. What's happening? How can we make it better for you?" And I think if someone tried to do that in this culture, the person would just literally not know what to do. They'd just be stunned.
Many years ago, it was in the early 90s, I was at a large factory here in Victoria, where there was about 300 men. And as was my practice when I started a project, and those days, still my practice, I go and talk to people who are actually doing the work to find out what's going on, and then I go and talk to the executives. It's always been my modus operandi. So the first day this place I thought I just have a bit of a stroll out in the factory. I had the permission from the people that hired me to do this, but it ended up, it wasn't just a stroll in the factory. I ended up spending the first day in the factory. And I had all these horrendous things about what was actually going on in the business. And the next day I said to the chief engineer, I wonder I said, I wonder, how often do you take a walk in the factory and see what the blokes are up to? Because in those days, they're all blokes. And he said, I haven't been to the factory for a couple of years. I said, all right. Might be opportune time then. Come with me. So out we go into the factory, and we stopped at the first part of the line. It was a big production line. We stopped at the first part of the line, and I said to this guy, do you know who this bloke is? And the guy says, no, wouldn't have a clue. And I said, oh, he's the chief engineer. I thought I'd bring him out to say good day and find out what's going on. You know, what are your challenges, and you know, what are you up to? And this guy, you know, told us a few things, and I made notes in my notebook. And then we went on to the line, to the next guy, and we repeated this. Turned out that was the second day. We spent the whole second day, me and the chief engineer, walking up the line, asking people, how's it going? What are your challenges, etc. We got back to the engineer's office, and he said, I found out more today than I was aware of in my entire 15 years in this organisation.
Sadly.
Now, not only that, but we adopted 3 or 4 ideas that the folks on the floor gave us on that second day. And we implemented those 3 or 4 ideas, and we added $4 million to the company's bottom line within a very short space of time. All because the boss, albeit with a bit of prompting, took the opportunity to get out in the real world and find out what's really going on.
Mm-hmm.
And I've often, you know, I still do that, and I still find out bosses that don't actually know what's going on. And yet our conversation is around, if we're present and we're really listening and we're focusing on outputs and helping people to do their best to bring those outputs about, it's a whole different world. And yet a lot of the world's still like it was back then, where the guy didn't even go out there.
Mm-hmm.